Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook, a podcast featuring a series of in-depth one-on-one conversations between game makers providing a thoughtful, intimate perspective on the business and craft of interactive entertainment. The Game Maker's Notebook is presented by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member-driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. I'm your host, Robin Hunicke, and I'm here today with Philip Tibitoski from Young Horses. And I wanted to take some time to talk with him a little bit about their new game, which they just released for the PlayStation 5, and also talk a little bit about how Young Horses came to be, how they broke into the industry, and what merry adventures they had along the way. So welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, Robin.
How you doing?
Glad to be here. I'm okay. All being said, and the existence of the world, I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hoping that you're doing well also.
I'm living. I'm reading the news every morning, like what's happening now, and I'm checking my DMs, like who needs me now?
Right.
Trying to be there for everybody else and spread a little joy and holiday cheer, despite all of the craziness that 2020 has thrown at us. I can't even imagine what it's like to be doing this sort of press tour and talking about new release during this time. What a weird thing to be doing, making and selling video games in the middle of a global pandemic and a potentially undecided election.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've actually kind of gone back in time a little bit, because when we were working on Octodad for the longest time, we were working out of our apartments remotely from one another for the most part. So it's been weird to go from that to being in an office and then back to this. But we're managing.
So, I mean, when you think about the place where you are with Young Horses today versus where you were when you started, what would you say is the biggest difference then? If it isn't that you're in a glamorous office surrounded by fantastic objects, what would you say is the big difference between say this and when you released Octodad?
I mean, I think the thing that sets the two times apart the most, besides the fact that we're all working full time now and are our own bosses, rather than this being like a after our full time jobs gig, side gig, is that we're very aware of all of the potential possibilities now in making a game, and the potential downfalls, maybe more so than we used to be. I think when it's your first time making something, there's a certain naivete that like is nice to have, or it like makes you feel, or like looking back on it, it feels a little bit more brave, even if it was just out of like not knowing, to have been able to do the things we did, and kind of, I don't know, move forward without any real reservations, only because we didn't know what to look out for,
Yeah.
Whereas now, approaching releasing Bugsnax, or having released Bugsnax now, it felt twice as scary in a lot of ways, because we knew what could go wrong, both based on things that had gone wrong in the past and based on just stories we've heard from other developers and other people in games.
Well, and it's, the goal of creating a game is always to make something really fun, right? And in general, you have a tendency to work in spaces that are very underexplored or completely unexplored, right? You're a blue ocean developer in the sense that you have made titles that are very, very different from what is typically made, which is in and of itself, it compounds the risk. I guess the question would be, why are you so crazy? Why you keep doing it?
I mean, I think that's what makes it fun to do, is that it's a little bit dangerous in an abstract way, at least, in that we're always exploring something either we haven't professionally or personally done before, or something that we don't think has seen a lot of, playtime or just visibility in games in general, whether it be the genre or the storytelling or just the perspective. And I think like ever since Young Horses was founded, it was founded with the goal of, hey, if this Octodad thing does well, we will continue to make things that if they were pitched at any other studio internally, even just amongst team members, they would probably be, I don't know, maybe not laughed at, but just passed on, because we often will tackle things from a thematic or story perspective first, and then figure out how the mechanics of it will work later. And I think that leads us down some interesting roads, because it's often that we're adapting and, I don't know, pushing mechanics together in ways that make physical sense to us, but when you look at them within a game space, it seems like a bad idea. Everything is very physical with Young Horses, which I think, comes from the slapstick nature of Octodad and what we did with that. Because even in Bugsnax, when you're putting down traps and capturing Bugsnax themselves, you're using these like physics contraptions and bait, and they're in these little environments that are systematic in how they behave with one another, and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's first person, and we had never done any of those things before.
Octodad was a lot.
Octodad was much more of a sandbox kind of toy of a game. Like there was a narrative to it and there were objectives and stuff, but a lot of the joy I think people took from it was watching Octodad's body flop around in that environment and just trying to physically exist in that state. And this is much more of an undertaking with Bugsnax.
So you were able to sort of see it from a systems perspective and see that you were adding multiple systems to the game, and as opposed to just leaning on the physics of the one character and then all the physics that, that character can create in the space. And so a series of chain reactions with brooms or boxes or other people and stuff like this. Now you're talking about a series of environments and some kind of physically interpretable world where the Bugsnax can be sort of observed and then captured, and then of course, yes, the ability to move through that space in first person. And like when you set out, did you have a sense like, okay, this game is going to take 10,000 years and we'll never finish it? Did you, were you able to sort of did you make a big fake schedule and then realize halfway through it was totally bullshit? Like what was the process like for you on this? Because like, yeah, you have on your big developer pants now, right? And so you can't just be in theory. Yeah, we'll just do it, I'll just do it this weekend when I'm not working, right? It has to become a much more focused process. So what was that like for you guys?
It was interesting we approached the same process that we did with Octodad, that are at the time our like professor mentors, Patrick Curry and Scott Roberts, had set up for us, where we all pitched our own internal ideas, no matter what discipline or like department, not that there's really departments in a 9-person studio, but that each person was in. And those were basically like 1-page pitches with just, this is what I want people to feel like when they play this. This is what it might sound like and look like and things like that. And this is kind of the narrative gist. And we took all of those, and there's 9 of us. So it was probably like, I don't know, 63, 70 pitches, something like that. And everyone kind of voted on them to see which ones they liked the most. And we took those and eventually whittled it down to about 3 games that we actually went out of our way to prototype. And through prototyping those 3 things and letting like some people, the Indie City Co-op that's run by Ryan Weimer of Men Who Wear Many Hats, that made Oregon Trail, they have a co-op, and we had a bunch of developers there come by and play our prototypes and tell us like which of these seem the most engaging, which of these seem the most interesting. Maybe not only just from what has been, presented in the prototype, but also what it could be, the potential of it. We took all that into account. We also took into account how marketable each idea was, like what was the audience or perceived audience for it, and does it actually fit what we want to be doing as a team? Does it allow each person to maybe explore something new or get better at something that they're already good at while they're doing it? Because I feel like early on, it's difficult to get total 100% buy-in from every person on the team when the idea is so fresh and you don't really know if it's going to pan out. And so we wanted to give people on the team other things to kind of grab hold of until they get to that 100%, hopefully. And I think it worked out. But yes, the realization that it was a wild amount of systems and mechanics for a team of our size to tackle was very obvious to us at the beginning. And Bugsnax itself, once we actually got down to that core idea, ended up being like 3 games maybe worth of mechanics at the start. We might have shown you some of them early on, but there was one that was based quite a bit on Pokemon Snap, the idea of being in a moving cart or vehicle. For us, it was a food truck, and there being Bugsnax out in this environment while you're on this track in first person, and maybe you're throwing traps out of that or bait out of that to capture them. And that was fun and interesting, but if you go back and play Pokemon Snap now, it feels very still, and I don't know, it's enjoyable if you have the memories of playing it before when you maybe were younger or something, but for now it's not a very exciting game. Didn't think it was that engaging anymore, and so we didn't go that route. The idea was that you would do that, you would capture them, and then you'd bring them back to your food truck and prepare them in sort of a Cooking Mama style, except at one point we were thinking about it as more of a scary, or I don't know about scary, but like uneasy thing. Like you're preparing these living beings to be fed to the members of this camp at the Snacksburg place. And to do that, you would like take them apart down to like their most essential ingredients, whether that was like pulling a popsicle stick out of a living popsicle or peeling a banana or something like that. We were looking at peeling mechanics at one point, and then you would take them to this town of people that even from the beginning were these Muppet-like creatures called grumpuses, and you fed them the different Bugsnax, and at least initially the idea was that it would affect their mood somehow, and run a sort of town sim.
Which is like already my interior producers just like having a major freak out. Like,
exactly.
No, you can't have like three different games, and then the last one is, oh, by the way, it's a town sim. Like, it's just
by the way, we're making the Sims.
Yeah.
So obviously, that became way too much, and we did prototype all 3 of those things. But it was just obvious that we were not going to be able to pull them all off, and we had to like hone it down and figure out what the game was. And
it's interesting. Into the Breach had a similar sort of backstory, and that they were kind of planning that you would be defending a city in waves, and then the city would have all these stats, and it would be like SimCity, and then they just axed all that and stuck with the defense stuff.
Well, I mean, that makes sense with them. I think for us, we were also moving in a direction in which I feel like we weren't initially playing to our strengths, which I think are in world building, characters,
storytelling,
like that, storytelling in general, right? which made sense. I don't know, with Octodad, and that it was a pretty simple game when it came to how it plays. But for this, there's just no way we were going to be able to tackle 3 games worth of mechanics while also pulling off the stuff that we enjoy and that we wanted to get better at.
Did you have any interest in growing as a team? Like, did you ever think like, well, we could just add 7 developers and build the second aspect of this team? Like, did that ever come up, or was it always like, is the scale of the team and being so your size part of a core value at the studio?
We definitely thought about it, and Octodad, we were privileged enough for it to do as well as it did, and we could have potentially expanded our team a decent amount, like you're saying, maybe add like 7-10 people or something. But we also knew that now that we had this kind of financial freedom to some extent, we didn't want to go completely all in that aspect of it, and instead maybe take our time and do something over 5-6 years if necessary, if it felt right for the game. And I think we kind of do like our small studio setup, just knowing, getting to 20 people, it's not like you wouldn't know everyone, but you do, I imagine, get to the point where it's like you don't know what everyone is up to exactly at any one moment, which makes it harder and more of a job to communicate. It's even difficult now, but like I'm afraid of the point at which we need other people to kind of be in the middle to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, and to where you can't just like yell across a room and have everybody know what's happening.
What was it like going from developing the game sort of in the regular way, which is that you're all in the same space and you can shout across the room and hear each other, into lockdown and like working from home and being more distributed? Like you said, it felt a little bit like going back in time, but like, were there some things that stayed true for you across the two development environments? You had been finaling, right? Like you were wrapping up the game, getting it ready for launch when everything hit, right?
Yeah, for the most part. There was still quite a bit of game to make, but
what? You mean you weren't almost done?
It definitely, I feel like by the time quarantine hit in March is when we stopped going into the office. We had reached a point where we knew exactly what the game was and needed to be, at least. And so it was a matter of just doing the thing. But I don't know. I feel like something that I want to become better at is reminding people of, I don't know, it sounds simple, but like just the act of reminding people of what is going on, what needs to be done, what the context of everything is, so that they understand like the importance of one thing versus another. That's really difficult and something that I have a hard time with and want to get better at. And this is, I don't know, I guess it's like slightly embarrassing, but to this point, we did not have a producer at all. Like no dedicated person to that role of organizing all the people and making sure everybody has what they need and understands what's going on. And we later, we hired Pop Agenda, which is like a small firm of 3 people that helped us both like market the game, get in contact with press in general, handle all the code distribution, but also we have MC Bordeaux, who helped us with the production side of things towards the end of development. And she was like an incredible asset because up to that point, I was doing a lot of those things alongside all of my other responsibilities. And it felt like I was, not doing well at any of them because I was like doing like adequate, at what needed to be done rather than like great at, a few things. I was stretched a little too thin. So
the classic problem, I think, of video games, right? When especially if you're in the design loop, trying to describe why something is important and how it should be done, and also maintain some sort of global view of what everyone else is doing and what their blockers are, is really hard if you feel pressure to be the single source of articulating the creative vision, or if you feel like you need to manage multiple creative visions over the course of a project, right? And so the producer comes in and has that little bit more of a highline view of everything, but also a little less of the pressure to be correct all the time,
right.
And that's very, very helpful because it takes away a lot of the internal sort of anxiety and stress around being a good communicator, and it gets replaced with just efficiency, which is such a benefit. But it's so hard to explain that to someone in the moment, right? What was it that drove you finally to bring a producer on board?
Well, we had chosen to work with Pop Agenda in general. I think it was 2018, it was weird having met them and known them otherwise in the industry in general, and then having like one in-person meeting and then never seeing them in person again was very weird. But I think it was just Jen being like, Genevieve St. Ange being like, hey, do you need any help like organizing these things or scheduling stuff or dealing with all this paperwork? And I think like commonly it's, I don't know, I had the tendency to be like, oh no, I'm fine. I have it. No problems. Extremely Midwestern, like humble, like, I don't need any help, or maybe like a toxic male thing, but like, I just eventually kind of caved and was like, yeah, I could really use some help with like these 30 things. Because I can no longer juggle them in my head. And I don't know if that's me getting older or more busy or both. But it's been an incredible amount of help. And I don't know, I guess to actually answer what you asked, I think the thing that changed the most is just having to communicate more deliberately when you're not in the same space, being able to kind of passively absorb things that are going on.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, Phenomena had been at 2 to 3 days a week work from home for most people, just because we have a lot of young families at the company. And, right. We're 28 now, 29. And so we were already kind of trying to be very deliberate about communication. But I think the pandemic has really shown us that you have to create spaces to sort of get that serendipity if you can, so Discord rooms where people can be working together in a room that's just turned on sound only and chatting while they're typing or making jokes or whatever, meme channels and things like this where people can kind of communicate. We have a kitchen chat in the morning where people go in and hang out while eating breakfast and talking, just like you would when you came in from your commute and got your coffee. Right. But it is really, it's a little bit, I guess it pings the game designer in me to think about all the things that seem so easy, that are actually really deliberate acts of communication and creativity in a shared space, and to try to surface those and make them into something that is part of a virtual community. We're onboarding 2 people this year, and then early next year. And yeah, it'll be so interesting, right? We've hired them and now we're going to be onboarding them and we'll never have seen them in person. I'm like, what an interesting time to be a developer.
I might need to talk to you about that, because I imagine we'll end up doing a similar thing soon, and that sounds kind of scary.
Well, I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to you talk about the game is the actual sort of humor in the initial concepts of, capturing these cute things and then taking them apart and feeding them to grumpy people. And, like in a way, I guess it just, it's interesting because I think we need some kind of ways to reflect upon this time that aren't just like quite so earnest and quite so in your face. Like, there's only so much like, this pandemic that you can do with one another. And I guess one of the things that I think people are excited about with Bugsnax is the feeling that you get from watching the Bizarro trailers, like that it's just going to be this nonsensical, weird experience that you don't have to take too seriously. And I think that that's, there's something in that. Did you feel that as the game was coming together at the end, and you like you said, you knew what it had to be, were you able to kind of take some of your lived experience from the last year and kind of get it in there, or was it a reaction to that? Like, where does it fall on that spectrum of like, being art about being you?
I think I can only speak to this obviously so much as I relate to it, since I didn't write the game directly, but that was Kevin Zune. But to me, the game is a lot about coping with various difficult things in your life, whether that be your identity, your work and life relationship, or relationships with others. And within the game, it feels as if characters are coping with it in a potentially unhealthy way, and are exploring different solutions that they happen upon trying to find the right one for them. Which I don't know. I think it's pretty much the same situation as Octodad, in which I feel like we're trying to pull off a magic trick of getting people to play a silly, goofy thing that for the most part is silly and goofy. But there's definitely a message and a theme and something we try to get across for people who are interested in looking in kind of investigating those things a little bit further. So, and I think, I don't know if how much of it is pulled directly from this year, but I think a lot of it is definitely pulled from lived experience from various people on the team or people that we know, and problems that are immediate to us or adjacent, whether it's climate change or living in a community and navigating that, or addiction, or I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there, and I think it also stems from the media that all of us enjoyed a lot as kids, and how that stuff, whether it be from Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or Jim Henson or whoever, it wasn't afraid to treat a younger audience like people rather than children, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we're obviously still very cognizant of the fact that this game will be played by kids, but at the same time, we're not trying to baby them, I guess. Because a lot of the stuff that even I still love, like, I don't know, Adventure Time or Steven Universe or Over the Garden Wall, things like that. They're presented in a way that is just different than some other media that is targeted towards children, that it feels respectful, I guess.
Yeah, I was actually just, I was going through some old Disney films recently, and I rewatched Sleeping Beauty and was just sort of remarking to myself as I was watching some of the animations in it, you can really see the difference between the sort of more standard classic animation stuff and then the more experimental animation that happens during the magic scenes, and thinking about the time in which that film was made, when probably some of the animators were experimenting with drugs, and like there was a lot of conversation in the community around, the ERA and women's rights. And so this idea of being betrothed to someone who you've never seen and then falling in love and then being hauled away to marry this person and then eventually discovering that they're actually your true love. Like there's kind of there's a level of feminism in the film that you wouldn't normally see if you're just watching it from a child's perspective, but it's definitely there. And even things like Time Bandits, or my friend and I recently watched Space 1999 and Greatest American Hero, and some of these different shows that were a huge influence on me as a child. And it's really interesting to see which ones hold up and which ones really don't. And I think that there was something about that, like, I don't know, Pee-wee's Playhouse kind of era, and when you had even just shows like Syphil and Ollie or Space Ghost, there were some really great things coming out of children's media when I was in college and you were in high school, probably, that were really fantastic, and they did do a lot to confront what was currently going on. And I think it's just going to be very interesting to see what we get in the next couple of years in terms of programming that addresses these issues of exactly what you're talking about: identity, isolation, trying to be in community on a planet that seems to be hurtling towards this really, really grim outcome. It's just it's very interesting when you think about being this 9-person team, like on this rock hurtling through space. Do you guys have a sense of mission around trying to communicate about these things? Is this something that's explicit in your culture as a team?
I think it's hard to say if I think. So, I mean, within our mission is wanting to create something for people to experience that kind of is joyful, relatable, can be enjoyed by anybody, which is difficult because I think that, the saying goes, if you create something for everyone, you're not creating anything for anyone, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
You're not if you try to be relatable to every single person, then you may not be as impactful on any one person.
It might be oatmeal,
right? But I don't know. It's part of our thing, which I think is also pulled from our influences. Because I feel like Pixar movies are that way. Like I mentioned, Nickelodeon shows are that way, where there's something there for the kids to enjoy, but there's also something there for older kids or adults who could get out of it as well. And on both sides of that, maybe some of it goes over the other's head, or isn't as relatable. I don't know if there's an explicit, like, we need to teach a lesson or we need to get these certain things across, but it's definitely something where we're very willing to explore whatever it is that is going on with us or affecting us, or we think is affecting the world, and project how we feel about that to other people.
Yeah. You guys have a history of taking your time to make games, which would make you sort of a slow studio in the sense that you're not rushing to deadlines or not trying to be on a publisher schedule, right? You're really, for the most part, trying to find the fun in the time that you allocate. And that is, I had someone at one point say, that's a lifestyle company. It's not a business, which I found kind of funny because, like, well, if it's not a lifestyle company, then isn't that just like hell?
Right.
If
like,
you
why
really
would you
have
want to work there?
your life to work, then why are you working? But being where you are now, I think one of the things that's interesting to think about is a little bit like you did start as a collective of people that were all volunteering effort towards this single goal. And then when you became a company, like, you're effectively still a co-op, right? I mean, it's sort of like you decide things as a group over time, as you were saying. So maybe talk a little bit about, like, the before you were a company and the after you were a company, and, like, what were those things that you carried forward? Because, like you said, when we were talking about it a little bit before, maybe not everything you do when you start off as a game company is very smart, especially if you, like you said, you don't have as many understandings of all the whammies that could be in the way. So, like, talk a little bit about how you started and, like, what things you carried forward and what things you would definitely not carry forward if you were to do it again.
I think the obvious differences there are just that before we were a company, before we had made any money with Octodad, people's livelihoods were not at stake. Other people had other jobs, and maybe, we were optimistically looking forward to doing this full time, but the stakes were also much lower because if Octodad didn't make any money, we all still had our day jobs to go back to if we needed to, by the nature of living in the US. But, like, being responsible for people living in this world and being able to do so, hopefully, like, comfortably and without or with minimal anxiety as much as we can afford to do so, is important to us. And I think that drives quite a few of our decisions. And I think, I don't know, it's difficult to talk about and look back on what we've done versus what we're doing now, because it's kind of like if you live with someone, or I don't know, like, noticing change is difficult when you're right next to the thing that is changing all the time because it's less perceptible. But I think it's just like we were talking before about being deliberate with communication. I think being deliberate with resolving, any arguments or fights or whatever like that has been something that we've had to work on a lot, given that we are a company that runs like a collective in terms of our decision making, because it, like they say, of too many like chefs in a kitchen or whatever, in which everyone trying to vie for a controller or something results in nothing being made or whatever, or maybe the design of something not having like a clear vision because there are too many hands on it. Making that work for us has never been completely easy, but it has always felt worthwhile, I guess, because everybody has ownership over pretty much everything. And like, while we have our own, specialties, there's no piece of the game that is completely off limits to everyone else, even if it's just input. But like I said, over time, we just had to get better at, presenting that input so that it's not destructive and is hopefully as constructive as can be, which has just taken a lot of work and like honest conversation between people of like, it's easy to, I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling, but it's easy to get lost within the heat of various moments when you're upset or maybe you're hurt by something someone said or whatever. And to be able to step back and then come back to the conversation once everything has maybe cooled or people have a different perspective on what was said, takes a lot of practice and like patience, and learned control over kind of, I don't know if it's control, but like
it's presence, right? I mean, you have to be present, and like, I think that the point you made at the beginning of that statement is particularly prescient, which is that it's hard to be present when you're used to something, when you're in a pattern and, you're doing your day, or, you've been working with this one person in a certain way for a very long time. You bring your perception of that person into the interaction. And unfortunately, human beings have a tendency to believe that everything around them is fixed and stopped, and that they are the only dynamic element in the equation, when in fact everything is dynamic all the time. And it's very helpful to this sort of processing unit that we all possess to be able to sort of freeze everything else and then reason through our own needs and wants as a single agent in a system which is mostly fixed. Because it allows us to feel like we have plans and that we're making progress, right? When in fact, there's absolutely no way. I think the pandemic has actually brought that to a very fine point. It's very easy to say, like, I will socially distance and not go to restaurants and dinners, and therefore I will be able to have a Thanksgiving where people come to my house, and then realize actually it's not possible to do that, because there's really no way to manage with 100% certainty your exposure, even if you are very, very careful. There's little ways in which it can be uncertain, and so that idea of being present is a hard thing, right? Because it involves getting out of your own automatic assumptions about everyone else, and then seeing them made concrete,
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was a lot about having started the company as just, friends who were trying to do something cool, but then being within a business situation and then also being in a position to where we start hiring people that were not part of that initial group. You have to like change your whole behavior set in order to hopefully make it as like comfortable and easy place to work as possible for anybody who didn't experience those like formative times, I guess, because it can be pretty intimidating to walk into a room with a group of like 7 or 8 people who have known each other for 10 years, and be the new person there, and so there's just a lot of stuff that we had to be very, I don't know, just aware of, like, oh, are we accidentally leaving this person out of this conversation by using this inside joke or whatever that like they have no idea about, and would be like, you can't sit there and explain an entire history of 6 people's relationship with one another just so that someone can get a joke, or I don't know. There's just like stuff where you're just trying to be considerate of the position that the new person you've brought in is in, and I don't know. It's complicated. It's
it is hard.
difficult.
It's very complicated. When I first left graduate school and went to work on The Sims, I remember my first day at work, I was sitting in my first meeting, and in the first 10 minutes of the meeting, they had used so many acronyms that I felt completely like I was drowning in my own mind. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, they're going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing. This is all games industry stuff. And I'm just a weird computer science grad student who like has somehow fallen into this hole of acceptance, but pretty soon it's going to fall right through the earth and I'm going to be in hell. And like, oh my God, this is so awful.
Right.
And then literally someone in the meeting being like, actually, before we move on, like, let's actually explain what these terms are to this poor person. I'm sure my face was like ashen, I'm sure I looked
right. Just like
going to throw up. Yeah. And then slowly over time, learning to ask, like, what does Fames mean? Or what is Edith? Or what is this? Or what is that? And like
right.
just being able to have that courage, from the other side was so hard. And I think that's in an organization that is very used to onboarding new people, right? So like when you're tiny, it's just a lot more to sort of work through.
Yeah, I think it was just like making a lot of efforts to maybe pull that person aside and say, how did your first day go, or how did your first couple of weeks go? Are there any questions or anything that you're confused about, or maybe you're concerned about, or trying to just be very approachable, or as approachable as possible. And
are you pro process? Are you like, are you the kind of person who would like, once you've done a thing a certain way and it works, you want to like say, okay, this is the process? Or are you more of a like, everything is an individual case and we address it on an individual case?
Some things I like to have process to, and other things I don't. Like we have we have quarterly kind of reviews, in which everybody on the team just kind of talks through what they did, and what they're planning to do, how they felt like the quarter went for them, both work-wise and just in general. Because I think it's important for everybody to kind of, like, ideally, you're always cognizant of the fact that, this person over here might have something going on in their life that you have no idea about, and maybe you don't need to even know about, but you should be aware that, like, you could be, I don't know, hurting their feelings or bringing up bad memories or something like that. And I think the kind of quarterly sessions we have are helpful in just being aware of what's going on in each other's lives, even if we're not hanging out all the time, or especially now when we're not hanging out at all. So that's been really helpful, and that's like a instated process. But then there's stuff where it's just like, oh, I can tell that this person has been kind of off, or like they seem a little more quiet than usual, or things like that, and trying to be in tune with how everyone is existing, I guess, and check in with them when things feel different. And, hopefully a lot of times they're fine and maybe they're just tired or whatever, but I try to make it, yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask. And I try to make sure that everybody knows that I'm always around for that stuff, which, yeah, just learning to be somewhat in charge, even though I'm not it's not that hierarchical, I guess, is interesting. And I don't know how well it would work if we got much bigger, but for now it seems to fit.
If my experience is any indication, a flexible model of leadership where people step into positions, of direction or authority or sort of organization and process when they are needed, it's a very flexible way to organize a team as long as trust is high. And so, if you think about it, like Navy SEALs or the French Legionnaires, use the same kind of model in the sense that, like, if somebody steps forward and says, I'm taking the lead, everyone else on the team says, okay, you're the lead, until they're not. And that it's known that a person doesn't step up and take the lead unless they feel that they're in their uncertainty, that they understand what needs to be done in that moment, and that they won't hold on to it any longer than is necessary. And I think that you can actually grow teams of 7 to 12 people that are flexible in that way, and have multiple teams like that in a studio. But there does become a point where you can't actually, like, those teams don't necessarily know as much about what's going on other teams.
Right.
That is something that does happen. And that's why you need the culture of sharing, funny memes and thinking about, being a parent. Like we have a parent channel on the Slack so that people can just post about how awesome it is to be a parent, which is really mostly just complaining about all the strange things their kids do,
Right.
in a loving and caring way.
Sure. But you need people to relate to and kind of share. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, especially the more diverse your organization gets and the more ages and, countries and types of folks that you have across the spectrum of humanity in your team, right? It's those touch points and values that really do hold a team together. Do you have like a special place where you share like funny jokes, media, and like things that are inspiring you in the moment? Because I feel like as a team, you really do have this really wonderful sense of the absurd, the theater of the absurd that is our lives. And like, it's just really interesting. Like, do you find yourselves like having watch parties and like playing things together right now? I mean, Over the Garden Wall is a perfect example. We had a watch party for that on Halloween as a studio just because we love it. And it's got such big feels, but it was so nice to just sort of be able to laugh and talk through it with everybody. Like, do you find that that's helpful in these times?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think we've had people play various things through Tabletop Simulator and Phasmophobia, is that the name of that game? Where you're like ghost hunting together. Things like that. But then of course we do have our like Discord server for the team where we have various channels of just like, here's the random place where it's just like, if you find anything that you think is interesting and you want to post it somewhere to talk about it, that is the place. And that ranges anywhere from like, here's a good new sandwich from this local place you can order to, I recently posted a thing about the like fake cult leader from the movie Mandy putting out a real album.
Oh, wow.
And stuff like that. Or there's like, oh, here's a cool animation or things like that. But there's definitely an attempt to have a shared culture in just the things that we enjoy or watch or play or read or whatever. And I think that was actually an interesting thing, starting to bring people on who are younger than us.
Yeah.
We like initially had a very shared like Nickelodeon, 90s kids, I don't know, feel to everything that we thought was funny or enjoyed. Yeah. And then just bringing people on and them just being like, what is that? We're just like, oh no, we're old. It has been interesting but fun because then, you get to find out a bunch of stuff that you maybe hadn't seen or known about.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy interacting with younger kids as part of my role at UC Santa Cruz and being on the Discord there, watching them share information. And I feel like I have like a cheat mode where I can just like go in and look at the dank memes chat on Phenomenal Discord. And then suddenly it's just funny to me. I feel like I'm getting schooled all the time by people much younger than me, 20, 25 years younger than me. Like I'll say something about my childhood and someone will be like, I was 2 then. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I was in high school and you were 2. That's so crazy. But it is really nice in a way also that it's, I don't know. I mean, there's no way to silver lining a pandemic, but like there is something nice about being able to all share the same kind of platforms and talk across them in some ways, like my mom is on Zoom now, which never would have happened in a million years before.
Right.
And I can send my dad TikTok links, in his phone now. And it does feel like there is something that's happening where we're learning from younger people at an accelerated rate. Also, they don't have this sort of sense of immediate loss of plans, it seems like, compared to everyone else. Like my niece, who's like 17, is like, well, I guess I might go to college, Sure.
Oh, well.
I don't know what's even going to be happening, And like, yeah, school's cool. I don't really like going to school in the first place. So like doing school from home is pretty awesome for me. I get to exercise more and spend more time with my friends, and I'm still learning, and it's cool for me. Like, I think a lot of her perspective is really refreshing, whereas maybe, some of us older folks are a little bit more like, can't fly here or can't, see this
Right.
person or whatever, right? Because our lives are more established.
Well, there's definitely a perspective there of if you have not experienced those things as much before, then you're not maybe losing as much relative to what you've experienced. Because I think if you haven't traveled a lot or if you haven't gone to college before, then you don't even really know what you're missing. Or maybe like what we perceive as like, oh man, how could you not have done this or gone here? Maybe it's not actually that important. It just feels important because we've lived it.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Like, I mean, I think the video games are doing so much for people in this time, giving people random ways to experience their agency and learn new worlds and figure out new systems. And
Yeah.
it's why a game like Bugsnax is so exciting, because you can you can immerse yourself in this really unfamiliar space and be in it in a way that it's completely transporting, which is really great, But at the same time, yeah, I mean, who knows? Are you seeing like interesting things from your fans as it goes out there and gets absorbed? Like, are you engaging with your community more now, do you think?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, despite despite my monotone voice, I swear, like I'm having a great time reading everybody's reactions. People are making their own grumpsonas and making their own Bugsnax, both out of food that they have at home or just like drawing them, things like that. There's been some fan fiction starting up, all sorts of weird stuff and cool stuff. Those two things are kind of synonymous with us, I think. But like, it's been really interesting to see how people have grabbed hold of different things within the game and like what they've clung to and what they've liked the most out of what is there. Because you always have your own perception of like, well, this is the point of the game and this is what I like about it. And then when you release it, maybe some people align with that, but not everybody is going to. A lot of people will find their own pieces of it that they like or dislike, and it's always interesting to see why. But I don't know. I feel like we've overall gotten a more positive reaction to this than even Octodad, which is weird because it felt like, well, we've made our meme game, and now how are we supposed to top that? Like this thing that went viral in a way, at least for the time. And it was very intimidating to go and make this because we were like, well, we're pretty sure we can make like a better game, if that is even a thing, just like a more cohesive game, I guess, a game that can be enjoyed by even more people. But I don't know if we can make something that would be more popular or that more people would latch onto than Octodad. So that was just like a thing that sat in the back of our minds, I think, during all of development.
Yeah, it's like the second album thing.
Yeah,
it's just always tough for any indie that has a big breakout hit. You always worry like, oh no, no. Now you got to confront the next one, and the next one is always, it's like a lot, right?
Yeah, it's like a good problem to have, but was just, I don't know, just something that like weighed on me at least the whole time. So
I mean, I think it's really common for this to happen. And, there's the world is full of people that do one or two things and then just like, the stress of having to keep topping it is too much for me. I think I'm done now. And I'm going to go become, I don't know, I'm going to run a surf shop in Costa Rica or like, become an underwater basket weaver or something like that. I mean, now that you're through it, do you feel like you would want to do it again? Are you up for another 6-year rodeo with something even weirder, do you think?
It's weird because Octodad was like 2.5, maybe 3 years if you include the like original student game. And after that, after it did well, we were like, oh great, now we can take our time. But now that we've taken our time and it's been 6 years, I'm like, maybe we do a little bit of a shorter thing next time, a shorter game. 2.5 years seems like reasonable. And we just aren't as ambitious. But I don't see that happening. To be honest, like It's unlikely that we will backpedal. Maybe we'll make something smaller but more polished and focused or something like that. I'm not sure yet. I do know that we are all going to take a break for a while, besides just like, these are things we have to do to keep business running. And then just kind of see what comes from that. Because I mean, we have plenty of, it's weird having multiple kind of creative pools to draw from now.
Yeah.
Because we have our two existing IP, I guess. And then like, so we could make something for either of those, or we could just do something entirely new again, which is also alluring. And I don't know quite how it's going to shake out yet, because we have still too many ideas for all three of those scenarios.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's really cool that you've been able to sort of take the momentum of a student game and turn it into a studio, and then take that studio and turn it into a deliberative practice where, you know, you're building things based on these kind of higher order feelings or goals around communication and creativity with a small, tight group of people. And it'll just be really interesting to see where you go next. I guess one of the things I always think about when I'm doing these interviews is sort of like, if you could go back in time, you know, and give yourself a piece of advice, you know, like especially thinking about younger listeners who are, you know, would see Young Horses as a radically amazing success. Like, what would be a piece of advice you would have for those out there that are just getting started? Like, now that you can look back, you know, if you could take a moment and be present, what would you say to yourself back then? Or what's a piece of advice that you would have wanted to have heard from someone like yourself?
I think an overarching, I don't know if it's a methodology or a way to approach, I feel like it's a way to approach almost anything, and is just that when you're observing someone else's lived experience, whether that's a person who was successful by their own metrics and others, or someone who maybe a project for them, they felt it failed, you can't take those results, or at least I think it's unwise to take those results and use them as an example of, like, you can't use them as a roadmap, just the examples themselves or the results themselves. You have to kind of investigate and observe the entire system that is their life almost. Like, who is this person? Kind of maybe where did they come from? How did they form this business or join this studio? Where did this game or project come from? What were the circumstances in which it was made in general and released? What was the world like at the time that it released and was made, and the opportunities that existed then that maybe do not exist now? You kind of have to take I don't know if it's like a holistic approach, but just analyzing every part of the project and the team that made it, I think is essential if you're going to use anything as an example for, or a like blueprint for what you would like to do.
Yeah.
Because I've seen, even since we released Octodad, I've seen teams go directly from here's our senior project to let's start a company, without that project maybe having the legs that I would feel would be necessary for me to take that kind of leap. Because I don't know, with Octodad, I feel like a lot of people, or some people maybe don't realize that there was a lot in place before we decided to start a company. And even then it was still, you know, a gamble to some extent. But we do a lot more risk mitigation and a lot more planning than I feel like it looks like on the outside. And so I think just for anyone who is trying to do this, they should, you know, ask me or ask anybody else who has done it before, things to look out for, things to consider, and then maybe even don't completely trust what I'm saying, because like I have my own biases and experiences that are not going to match up with theirs, and my own, you know, privileges or whatever that may have led me to being able to do what I do that they may not have. And I think it's just very complicated, and it's not as simple as like, well, we made a game and now we're going to do a Kickstarter. And it's like, well, Kickstarter's not the greatest place for that anymore necessarily. And, you know, the amount of money you're going to raise is not enough to pay any human like decent wage to live generally, even if you've seen success from other studios. So maybe that's not the best route to take. So maybe try this other thing, or I don't know. And it's take that per person, per project, and then apply it to the fact that you then have to get an entire team to work together well. And it's just like, I don't know, it's a wild set of circumstances and context that I still don't understand how we have managed to do to some extent. And so it's scary to me when someone younger than us approaches us and asks us about that process and about like what they want to do. And I try to be optimistic for them, but just lay out here's the 1,000 places that this could go wrong. And I don't know, it's been tough over time, I feel like, because some people you give advice or you let in on kind of everything that's gone on with your own projects, and maybe they follow that advice and maybe they don't.
Yeah, it's impossible, actually.
Right. I can't imagine like you being a teacher, like that's got to be a thing all the time, right?
Oh, I mean, the thing that I do is exactly what you do. I say that it's the only thing you can control, really, is yourself and your approach to the conversations and the conflicts that you have. And, you know, creative collaboration under uncertainty is the definition of human. It is why we are how we are and what we are. We collaborate and we design things in order to change the state of the world from what it is to something more aligned with what we perceive to be better or our values. And that in and of itself is a really problematic truth of humans, because we have, as we talked about at the beginning, we have the ability to believe that we are the center of the universe when in fact we are a very, very small part of it. And individually, but also collectively, like humanity is just such a tiny speck of dust compared to even just, you know, beetles. So it's right. Like, you know, I mean, I think that what I try to tell them, and I think what I'm hearing you say as well, is that you have to do your best within your constraints, and you have to know what those constraints are to the best of your ability. There's no way to know all of them. And so that's what makes creativity difficult and scary, but it's also what makes it exciting. You know, it's what brings the flavor to a day when you're trying to tackle a problem and then you collaborate with a few other people and you get that sorted, whether it's doing a localization pipeline or coming up with a new system for animation, or just that one line in that joke that just made everybody laugh at the playtest. Like, those moments are really great. And, you know, getting between them is navigating, you know, the uncertainty of living. But yeah, you just try to tell them, try to be a good person and acknowledge that you don't know what you don't know, and do it as soon as you can so that you don't accidentally step in it. Because there's plenty of other traps out there for you. So don't make your own. You know, don't start fires. Don't talk about each other behind each other's backs, and try to be kind to one another. And I think actually probably the number one thing that has emerged over the years with teaching, and it's been about 7 years now, is that the teams in the senior sequence that we have, they do best when they have a team culture that they advertise at the very beginning, when they have in their very first pitch slides, this is the kind of team we are. Like, we're a works all night, late night, jamming on graphics team, and our game is going to look really sick, you know? And that's the culture that we have. And if you want to be that, like, you know, code warrior late at night, staying up, you know, just trying to get it to look perfect, then you should be on our team. Or, hey, you know, we're just a bunch of cabin cozy kids, like, making this game about frogs, and like, that's what we're doing. If you want to make a cool rainbow game with us and like have some ice cream and talk, like, that's what we're going to be doing. And like, it really does make a huge difference if they start from the beginning knowing the kind of people they want to be. Then it really does reduce a lot of the other issues that can come from just trying to get things done under uncertainty.
I might pass that along because that's very good. Because that is, I mean, you know, with At Young Horses, it's like we make weird things that we are interested in, want to make, while also only working like 30, 35 hours a week, ideally. And, you know, like, it's very chill, and it's, you know, take the time off when you need to and that kind of thing. And we only want to work with people who also want that.
Yeah. I think that knowing yourself is hard in any world, but especially in this world where the opportunities to see yourself mirrored in others are getting so lean. And like, it's very important to make it a deliberate practice. I mean, even the Buddha would say the same thing, right? There is no such thing as a one way. There's just each individual person's way. And that is something that only the individual person can know. It's why there's no way to say yes or no to any question that you ask a Buddhist, because there is no real answer. There is no real fixed you or me or any of this. And I guess, with that, I will just say that it was really great to catch up with you. I'm so proud of you guys. Like, I remember when you were just starting out and having conversations with you and John about like how to organize the team and what Young Horses would become. And it's just so great to see you launching a title on the PlayStation and like coming out with this great vibe during this time when everybody needs a little bit of laughter and contemplation in their lives. So thank you for doing that, Phil.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's really nice to talk to you and just hear your voice.
Yeah. I look forward to playing your game when my PlayStation finally arrives, if it ever does.
Yeah, I wish we had more control over that.
It's all right. It just bears saying that everybody's dying for one. So I hope that this coming year is really great for you. Have a fantastic holiday. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Game Maker's Notebook. For more information on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, our podcasts, and our other initiatives, please visit www.interactive.org.